Recorded live from the secret underground lair of Crimson Cowl Comics and Collectibles, this is the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast.
The following issues may contain spoilers. We are going to make our dreams come true, and we'll do the same for you. I'm Anthony.
I'm the doctor, Dr. Kurt's dad.
And I'm Jim.
Welcome to issue number 343 of the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast. Every time we record, we talk about comic books. On this week's program, we're just going to be covering weekly reviews. That's where we go back and forth, talk about the books that we've been reading, whether they're new, whether they're old. We're going to talk about them there. So we're going to jump in with the weekly reviews. First up for me is the Muppet Babies Omnibus. It's all your favorite Muppets in pint-sized antics from their youth. There will be adventure, romance, great jokes, and much, much more. Like the ghostly tale of the haunted nursery, the fable of Kermit and the Beanstalk, and the quest for the idol of doom. The Muppet Babies will be lost in time and lost in space. They'll caper in Storyland, and they'll take flight as superheroes. They'll even end up in a comic book, and your favorite fantasy-loving frog will step into the shoes of some of fiction's greatest heroes. All right, so this is the Muppet Babies comic book collection. Not too long after the cartoon debuted in the early to mid 80s, did they capitalize by jumping right into the Marvel Comics here? Because Marvel, like Entertainment or Marvel Production, some Marvel studio was the one that was doing the animated series. So then, rightfully so, they had the deal to do comic books as well. And what was cool is that the comic book stories, they weren't adaptations of any of the episodes. They were all brand new stories. So while we had, like, I think 6 or 7 seasons of the original cartoon, we also had a pretty decent run of the comics with all new stories. So, and as I was flipping through this, I read this over the course of, a couple months and kind of chipped away at it, read a little by little. And this morning I went through and I was just going to make some highlight notes of like what kind of adventures. And what's really weird is that some of the stuff that I wrote down just by flipping through is in the synopsis that I just copied and pasted from the internet. So some of this might be repeating, but they explore a mystery door that's in a haunted nursery. There's several space adventures. They kind of tackle that subject maybe 3 or 4 times. One of them is very Star Wars parody heavy, as they would do in the cartoon and stuff, and just do a lot of like, they would have a lot of the footage from like the original like movies and stuff, and like have like live action Indiana Jones cut scenes that they would be animated over and stuff like that. So they do a lot of the similar stuff in the comic books. They have a lot of other storybook tales. One of them being the Kermit and the Beanstalk, and the giant is played by Gonzo. So you get up to the top, and Gonzo's the giant, and his wife is Miss Piggy. And this is something I'm trying to remember, but that's because throughout Muppets, whether it be the puppets or the cartoons, Gonzo has always had a crush on Piggy, and she wanted nothing of it. So this might have been one of the tales that was being told from Gonzo, that his wife was Piggy in this story. You'd have several visits throughout the series from Baby Bunsen and Baby Beaker. They would come into the nursery and have their little science experiments and lead into other adventures. Piggy is the Queen of the Nile. They've become superheroes. Animal was running around with a magic crayon, and with that reminded me that I think there was an episode that was very similar to that, even though these weren't adapting that. I do have a memory of that in the animated series, of him just like coloring every like room or every character and stuff like that. I do have the complete series waiting on my to watch pile. So now that I finished the Omnibus, I'm going to dive into that proper. That might have been the only story that was maybe repeated to some fashion, because I do remember that storyline. They had a lot of monsters and mystery stories. One of them was Dr. Bunsenstein's monster, I think. I think that was one of the stories. And it dealt with Animal. Beaker wasn't the monster or anything. He was most likely the Igor. Yeah, probably. Like I said, I read this over the course of a while, so I don't remember the roles on that one. There's dinosaur stories, there's Robin Hood, and one of my favorite ones, the titles are always fun, so they go into the Wild Wild West, but it's called the Mild Wild West. And then what's really cool in this is that they do they include the adaptation of the Muppets Take Manhattan movie, which is where the Muppet Babies first showed up in physical puppet form as a dream sequence. And that was one of the things from the movies that was very beloved, and very immediately people were saying, hey, we should capitalize on this Muppet Babies idea. And that led to, I think, started with just like merchandise, whether it be actual merchandise for babies and nurseries and things like that, young toddlers and whatever, and then eventually led to the cartoon and just more merchandise and all the other things. And Babies became a very successful spin-off, basically. Now that I don't have to read from my notes, I can just kind of show off some of the artwork. This is collecting, I think, 26 issues of the original run. I think they did a couple extra random issues through like different imprints and publishers and such, but this is through the Marvel one, so that might be the separation there. Here's some of the space stuff. You can see that there. And so in addition to the 26 issues, you also had the that adaptation, which I think was like 3 or 4 issues, and it includes some behind the scenes of like pencil work and original art page scans and things like that. And then it also includes the Marvel Age issue that they released for the when Muppet Babies was coming to comics. The Marvel Age comics was ultimately like, would you describe it as like a magazine, maybe, in a way? Like, it was comic size, but it had a lot of like just prose and stuff in addition to images. But it was basically like, oh, get to know the authors and show off artwork and preview series and stuff like that. Oh, here is the Magic Crayon one where he was running around and he colored this bear all pink and stuff like that. And there's a polka dot deer. But yeah, so let me see if I can just find any more. Here's some examples of some of the dinosaur stories. But much like the cartoon, it very much in that same format of them starting out in the nursery, nanny checking in and leaving the room, and then they just lead their imagination runs wild and it turns into these scenarios and ends up back at the nursery again. So that's what was kind of cool, is that it followed that same kind of format. It didn't try to do anything different. Not for any, that's not a criticism. It just was a cool way to see like, oh, we're just getting more Muppet Baby stories beyond the cartoons. And then some of the issues, as I mentioned, the cartoon would do like the live action stock photos and stuff like that. So they do tease some of that throughout the artwork and stuff too, where they have some of these more realistic, photograph type drawings and backgrounds and stuff. And there was a couple more too I was trying to find, but yeah, it's if you're a Muppet Babies fan and you've never dipped into the comics, you're just going to get just more of what you love, basically, except now you just have to read it. So but yeah, and there are some, it doesn't happen in every issue. Most issues are broken up into 2 stories per issue, so you're looking at over 50 individual stories. But then they'll have a bunch of like puzzles and mazes and things like that they kind of include that are often woven into the story too. So you'll see them like get into a sticky situation, and then you have to find your way out through the maze, and then you continue on. So it was very, very well done, and this omnibus just collects them all. I figured it was going to be a lot easier just to get it in this version, opposed to, I think I have a couple scattered issues here and there. For those watching Crimson Cowl Comic Club on YouTube, you saw some examples there, and then the hardcover treatment, and then the dust jacket as well, and then it's got the covers in addition to them within the pages too. But yeah, So Muppet Babies, the Marvel Omnibus, they're making their dreams come true, and they'll do the same for you. And it's true. My dreams will come true by them putting this omnibus together. So
Get young children to read, which is a good thing, and
yeah,
old children like us too.
exactly. And they're all very well for the story, the bedtime storytelling type of format and everything. Like these kind of adventures are just perfect, especially when there's like mini stories within. So it's yeah, definitely I think a very timeless piece. And reading all this, there really wasn't anything that like outdated it. Like they're not making current like movie actor references or anything. There's no like song references. There's no technology references of like phones or like it's very timeless. So I think it holds up, I should say, as long as you can physically hold up the omnibus because it does get heavy. But so yeah, that is the Muppet Babies Marvel Omnibus. Check it out if you haven't already. Jump over to Dr. Kurtstad. What you got?
Well, I was going down the checkout line the other day. And usually I'm looking over at the magazines I'm not really interested in, People, The Inquirer, whatever's there. And suddenly I looked over and I suddenly had to stop and look over again because there on the rack is Justice League magazine. It's like, what?
Okay.
What is going on? And so I had to pick it up and see what it is. And it's interesting. It seems like in some ways what they did was put this together to introduce people to the Justice League. And the opening page is top heroes, top talent. And so what they did was in this, they put the opening issue of 4 different runs of Justice League to give you this sense of this is where the Justice League has been, this is where the Justice League is now. So they have in this magazine they have the 1996 Grant Morrison first issue of JLA. So they go back to 1996, show us when Grant Morrison takes over. I believe that's like right after Flashpoint or something. So we get this kind of shift into a new sense of the Justice League. And Grant Morrison is the writer, and we get a kind of sense of that. Then they give you the 2011 takeoff of Justice League with Justice League #1. That one was done by Jeff Johns. So you get Jeff Johns writing, and Jim Lee is the artist. So you get this kind of differing art style now, and a different writer, a different take on the Justice League. Then they have the 2018 Justice League first edition that Scott Schneider wrote, and Jim Chung was the artist that drew that particular one. And then they have the first issue of the most recent runs of Justice League, which was written by Mark Waid, and Dan Mora was the artist that went with it. So you get these differing kind of styles and approaches to the Justice League throughout the book. It will change how the Justice League looks, who the characters are involved. Most recent one, they took Justice League International, which brings in a whole different set of Justice League characters that are part of it. It was just a great sort of, if you don't know anything about the Justice League, here you go. You can get an idea of what's going on with Justice League, whether you might be interested in reading or searching for past issues of Justice League. And I just thought it was a neat idea. And you do get some really great artistic work done in it. They picked some of the top people who've done the Justice League for over 25 years now. And so I was just fascinated that here it is at the grocery store on the rack, Justice League magazine. So if you're interested in getting to know a little bit about the Justice League, if you've never read any of it, at least one of the stories gives you a good origin piece. It's the one that I don't remember which of the authors started it, where something big is going on in the world, and Green Lantern runs into Batman, and they kind of go at it for a while, and then they go and see Superman, and it just starts that issue just brings those three together. And
That's the 2011 reboot.
I was going to say, is that the new 52?
yeah, I think that's the new 52 one was that one. So interesting. And available. You might see more of these out there as we go along, where here's a way for you just to stop in the grocery store and say, hey, I can find out about the Justice League.
Dave.
Yeah.
What is the publication date on that?
The publication date is, let's see if I can find it in the front here.
And
I mean, it's not set up with like lots of stuff in the front, so you open it up and you expect to see like a publication date. All you get is DC stuff, and then you get this this letter from Jim McLaughlin that tells you what's going on in the book, but there's not really a date in here, I don't think. Oh wait, in the back, here we go. It was in 2025.
Okay. And I was
I
curious.
was wondering. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was just gonna say I was curious about the price too when you're getting 4 issues and a magazine off the checkout.
It was like I think like $10.
Okay.
It was what you would normally pay for a magazine like this. So yeah, I was very fascinated to kind of run into it.
Yeah, because the current run of Justice League is called Justice League Unlimited.
Right. And that's what you get the first issue of from this time period. You get Justice League Unlimited #1.
All right.
There it is. There's the first page of that.
I'm enjoying it, but I still like the new 52 version. I thought that was pretty nice. The way they completely reimagined everything and gave you pretty much a fresh start with everything.
Yeah, I probably lean toward that, or even more toward the Silver Age Justice League of runs that I think were really great. I think the interesting thing about Justice League Unlimited is you get a wider group of characters. So if people have some touch with some character that maybe isn't in much, you might run into them in Justice League Unlimited, and
you can call on absolutely everybody.
Right. And you get a wide range then of cultural sort of images and things that are part of it, much different than the more limited JLA or Justice League at New 52 Justice League. So, but keep an eye out. You never know what you'll see in the checkout line.
There we go. That's cool. All right.
Look for that one.
Jump over to Jim.
All right. This is a reread for me. This is something I read when it first came out back in 2019. And the things that have been going on in the news that we hear about online and everything have made me want to read it. And it's just taken me a few months to actually dig it out and start reading it again. This is They Called Us Enemy, written by George Takei. And the art is by Eisinger Scott and Becker. And it is George Takei's story of being a Japanese American who lived through the beginning of World War II and what happened to them in California, going through the internment camps and the experiences he had as a little boy with that. He goes into great detail into how they were treated. Immediately following the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were widely discriminated against and harassed and even beaten and tortured by their neighbors. And then a few months later, the president actually issued Executive Order 9066, which authorized the military to declare areas that they would control, and they would be able to remove undesirable people. The executive order never specifically said Japanese Americans or anything like that, but it was the intent because that's what immediately went into effect. Basically, all of California, Oregon, and Washington was that zone. And the Japanese Americans were immediately ordered to pack up their things. They were collected at theaters and train stations and everything they could find and shipped to camps all across the western United States. The Takei family ended up in eastern Arkansas, the farthest one from their home possible. I don't know that they were necessarily singled out for that one for any particular reason at the time, but later on his father did suffer persecution because of his political beliefs that he held during this time. Later on, the government asked many of the Japanese Americans if they would be, even though that they had been basically imprisoned, would you be willing to sign an oath of loyalty? Would you be willing to serve in the military and take orders to fight against anybody else? And all these things. And his father was asked, and his father said no to all these questions, not because he was a disloyal American, but because he had been treated like a disloyal American and never given an opportunity to be a loyal American in the first place. His father was an immigrant, so he was not naturalized, or he was a naturalized American, not a native born. But George was native born, and his brothers and sisters were as well. In fact, his mother was a native born citizen.
I don't think she was, though, because she had to make the decision at one point whether to go back to Japan or stay in the United States. And she chose to go back. She at first was going to go back to Japan because if you sign the loyalty oath, what happened is you had to reject your connections to Japan totally.
Right.
And she would then be cut off from her family forever and things. So she was going to go back. And then at the last minute,
But early in the book, it says that she was born here, but then her father sent her to Japan to be educated. So she had very close ties with Japan. So when she did come back, then she met her husband and had the family. And when the things with the loyalty oaths came up, they were all, it was not just their family, but many families were torn apart, whether or not they want to give up their cultural heritage and completely reject it and stay here, or to go back and see their families and live there and give up their things here for a country that was treating them so shabbily. So, that's all really well described in the book, and it comes out not in a very accusatory or rhetoric with a lot of angry rhetoric. It's just a simple declaration of what he experienced and what he saw through his parents' experience. The book is basically told as his real life experience. I think it says in 2017 he gave a TED Talk speech at the FDR Presidential Library, and he is telling the story that he experienced there, and they basically took that story, wrote it into this basically a graphic novel, not just a comic book, and it has beautiful pencil drawings that rather than being a real life realistic scene, it resembles art from a children's storybook. It's not very distorted or fancy, but it looks like a children's storybook version of telling a real life story. So it's very nice that way. Of course, black and gray then, because it's pencil drawing. And it tells, while during the course of the story, he will occasionally flip back and forth between the story in the concentration camp to what was going on in the government and explaining that, to even advancing a little bit further into the 60s, 70s, and what things were happening there. And then even more into the 90s and the early 2000s, and how the United States began publicly acknowledged how badly they did things, and were making efforts to restore the reputation of Japanese American soldiers, giving them the honors that they were due these many years later, making efforts to acknowledge that things had been done wrong and that they were, at the very least, owed an apology if they couldn't make any other restorations. So he tells all these stories like along the course of what his family experienced during the camp. Near the end, he talks about his own life as an adult, how he became involved in the not only Japanese rights, but human rights in general, working for the LBGTQ agenda items and working to get those things established, and civil rights and things like that he's very publicly spoken about pretty much ever since he became popular on Star Trek. He's used his platform to stand up for these things, and he still does to this day. And one of the things that made me want to read it was I saw a little video clip of him not too long ago, and they were asking him about the things that are going on where Latino people were being picked up and sent to camps and centers without trial and everything. And he said something to the effect, basically, I wrote a book about what I think about that a few years ago, and maybe you should go read it. And it was like, he was not that stunned. He was very politely said it, but it was like, that made me, I was like, yeah, I should read that book again. But yeah.
And I thought one of the most powerful elements of the book is sometimes history becomes something that we read about and it's just in the past and we lose the human element of it. That graphic novel captures the humanity of the people who are caught up in this moment of time. This is not just something that happened. It affected real people and had real consequences for the people who were involved.
For you and I, we had my parents were children at that time. So they experienced it. They told me about it. So they knew it. But people younger than us, they have maybe no absolutely connection to that time period at all. And if it is not discussed in the media, they don't understand what happened. And these stories will get lost if people don't keep talking about it. And unfortunately, that seems to be a possible trajectory we are on right now. And it's a good thing, a good time to remember we did this before and realized we made a mistake. Don't make the mistake again.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no easy transition from something very serious and important to talking about a horse and a bulldog.
I laughed so hard watching the video you sent earlier.
So this is Charley and Humphrey #1. Here comes the first exciting issue of Charley and Humphrey.
Just 1 second.
Yes.
Life goes on. It can't all be serious. We have to have fun too.
Yeah. When a motley crew of fleas stow away on Charley, it's up to the accident-prone Humphrey to save the day before the itchy interlopers ruin an important ceremony down at the Seahorse Docks. This is done by Pat McCormick, Justin Sane, and John Hageman. Now, before I get into describing what this is, beyond Jim seeing that video, does anybody know these characters, Charley and Humphrey?
No.
Okay. So a couple months ago, I saw this in the previews catalog. Charley and Humphrey. I looked at it, and I'm like, well, I like the names. It looks fun. It looks goofy. First issue. Not familiar with the publisher, this and that. But I'm like, oh, they kind of look like a puppet characters. At least the horse does. Mm-hmm. And so as I read the synopsis and looked into it, I had the impression that this was lore created fictionally of these of these puppet show characters, and now they're just telling stories of them, that this is all just fake within this world. Doing some research, I found out that in the 60s and the 70s, more specifically in San Francisco, Charlie and Humphrey were puppet characters that were done by Pat McCormick, and on like the very local, network of, can't think of the word I'm looking for, but was its own puppet show that happened very locally to them. And it had its local fame. I'm sure I got to do some more research. I want to see if there's documentaries and stuff about it. But you can find many clips on YouTube and such. And I found out that in 2021, they came out with this comic. So this comic here is several years old, but it was put into a current previews at the end of last year. Whether that's just a thing that happened with the publisher being like, hey, this is the first time we're going wide with it, I don't know. But it was new to me because I've never read it or heard about it. So Charlie and Humphrey are these characters. They live together. We have Charlie Horse, if you will. And then Humphrey is a bulldog, and was really cool. Right off the bat, I found out, oh, this is printed on newsprint. So much like, how we have the Alterna comics and stuff like that, where it's new stories but printed on, old methods and stuff like that. And this was a ton of fun right off the bat because they're talking about a very important ceremony, like a boat christening. Charlie Horse is kind of like he's like a captain, and he runs this dock, and they have this boat that they're going to christen. There's going to be a speech. There's going to be a crowd. All of this stuff is going to happen. But it turns out that Humphrey the dog does not want to go because he is hiding the fact that he has fleas. And Charlie says that, hey, remember the last time you're prone to ruining events and gatherings and stuff because you have fleas. But he's denying. He's like, oh no, he's like, I think he just says he's busy or something like that. But he makes up some sort of excuse. But he's hiding the fact that, yes, he does, in fact, have fleas, to the point that we even get dialogue from the fleas themselves, as they are very happy to be nesting inside, in the hair of the dog here. And what's interesting is that these fleas basically, and this is all still part of the setup, even though it's a couple years old, but this is all still kind of the setup, is that the fleas themselves realize that they've had enough of this dog, and they're going to jump over to the horse, unbeknownst to Charlie Horse. So now Charlie, who was making sure that Humphrey wasn't going to bring fleas to his big boat christening, for his big speech, for his big event, now unknowingly is bringing fleas to that event because of Humphrey. So, but there is one flea that is left behind that Humphrey is talking to, and that's when he realizes that, yep, we have to go find these fleas. This was a flea left behind. So now the bulldog and the flea are going to team up to try to get there in time and hopefully get these fleas off of the horse before his big speech. So there's an adventure of them getting on a public transit bus. There's good comedy with Charlie Horse and getting ready for his speech and realizing that he's feeling something is maybe a little off as he starts scratching. And it's kind of a race to try to stop this problem and not ruin the event, as Humphrey is prone to do. So that is kind of the setup. It's an all ages fun. I was so excited to find out. I was still believing that this was fake, that like this was just a design tactic of a parody or something, because on the back inside cover you have a little history about this old TV show, and they have old pictures and old puppets, and I'm like, you can do a lot with cameras and design and making things look old, and I'm like, they're really leaning into this gig, because I just, once again, I was still sold that this was just fake characters and fake properties. And I was very excited to find out that once I searched it on Wikipedia and Google and YouTube, to find out that, yeah, there's a puppet show that existed in San Francisco. So I will be checking out more of these characters, not only in comic book form, because I ordered directly from the publisher to get the next 3 issues. There's 4 of them total in this run. And so I'm excited to read more as well as watch more and see whatever clips are available online. And for something that, been in Wisconsin my entire life, but now I'm going to get excited to watch a San Francisco local television puppet show that existed back in the 60s and the 70s. So there was even a bunch of merchandise on the publisher's website through 10 Ton Press. 10 Ton Press. And I went to the website and they had a t-shirt and everything. They had a hat. After reading one comic and watching a couple minute clips, I almost bought a shirt. I almost bought a hat where I'm like, I just want to be a Charley and Humphrey fan and walk around and have people be like, what's that? And I'm like,
What's
I don't know. You don't know who Charley and Humphrey are? Well, I didn't a week ago either, but hey, I have this cool hat and shirt, but I'm almost committing to it. That's how much fun these characters were. So I'm excited to see what other adventures there are, what other characters, and then what that puppet show did, and watch those old clips. So
Cool.
So yeah, there we go. That was Pat McCormick's Charley and Humphrey. Now he was the creator. If I'm not mistaken, because I know I think he's not with us anymore. I think So unless he's over 100, because I think he was born in the 1920s, I should say. But anyways, these creators are carrying on the legacy that Pat McCormick created. So there we go. All right.
Cool.
Jumping over to Dr. Kurtzstad.
I'm going to continue my story of adventures in the grocery lane.
Okay.
Because after seeing Justice League, a week later I was going through, and suddenly I saw another book I wasn't expecting to see there on the rack. All of us probably at one time have read Mad Magazine. It is an American tradition. My favorite parts of Mad Magazine were always snappy answers to stupid questions and spy versus spy.
Nice.
There in the grocery line was Spy versus Spy, the big blast. It's a magazine that's kind of a celebration of all the years of Spy versus Spy. And I actually learned some incredible things. First of all, you all remember the early Spy versus Spy stuff, right? And how was it presented in the world?
All like black and white?
Black and white. But now everything in Mad has been colorized. And they went back and through, I guess, a really neat kind of color brushing sort of approach, they've recolorized all the Spy versus Spy cartoons and colored things, and it really is great. And what I found especially fascinating is they had segments where they've written about the two people who have been the only two people who have been doing Spy versus Spy over all the years. First of all, there was Antonio Phobos, who they did a little cartoon about. That's how we get his story there. And he's a Cuban immigrant. Came over here during all the political strife in Cuba. And he had been a cartoonist in his country, tried to find a way to break in this country, ended up being contacted by Mad Magazine. They brought him in, and he did these Spy versus Spy cartoons for Mad Magazine over all the years. And just his story is so interesting. He is just a really wonderful sort of caring person. He never lost his care for the Cuban community, remained connected to them, but was always drawing his friends into places, was always buying things for people. It was just, his life was filled with this kind of joy and completeness all the time. And he just shared with everyone, and just hearing his story was just incredible. In fact, the last little panel here on his story says, Antonio Phobos lived simply and didn't accumulate anything. All was given to his family and friends, and he gave us his immeasurable talent until he could not hold a pen anymore. So we then get many of his various spy versus spy pieces, swinging the large ball at the door and getting hit with it because it bounces off the door, all the wonderful things that happen in Spy versus Spy. So we get all of his material, and then they introduce the second writer of Spy versus Spy. I want to find that. Peter Cooper takes over Spy versus Spy then. What's interesting as you read it over his story is that he was an award-winning cartoonist. He had gotten all kinds of awards from places. It says he spent his teenage years in Cleveland, and then he penned a number of critically acclaimed graphic novels, created comics, illustrations, elite publications in the New York Times. But then in 1997, when Antonio could no longer do the comic strip, he took it up. And that was his main focus then. This person who had gone through all these great artistic things came in to do Spy versus Spy. And they talk about his personality, which was he loved to play tricks on people. And anything that would go wacky in the office, they were sure that it must have been him that did whatever happened in the office. So we get then a bunch of his comic strips. Some of them go back to black and white. He occasionally went back and did some that were in black and white. So it was great to see all this. And another piece of this that was just, I thought, really special is they had a number throughout the magazine. They had a number of Spy versus Spy poster collections where other artists did kind of pinup posters for Spy versus Spy. So in this particular section, they had Rich Weber, Andrea Carahillo, Tony Millionaire, Nathan Sawai, and they came up with things like this that were just gorgeous, I thought, pieces of artwork that people did based upon the Spy versus Spy comic strips. And I thought, wow, this is just an amazing piece of graphic work. And they have like 3 different galleries throughout with different representations of Spy versus Spy that were just, I thought, really wonderful. And one thing I didn't realize, because I haven't read Spy versus Spy for a while, was they also have Spy versus Spy versus Spy. With a female spy who comes in and usually shows up both of the other spies. So I thought that was a great sort of addition to things as well. And Spy versus Spy has always been an interesting series for me because we have these 2 spies, one dressed totally white, one dressed totally in black. But it's not a story of good versus evil. It's one side wins sometimes, the other side wins sometimes. And on the whole, they don't really get anywhere. And I wonder a little bit if that somehow mirrors our reality. That idea of, we try to one up this person or this country or that country. But in the end, maybe it all really isn't about one-upping anybody anywhere. That all it does is lead to a constant rotation of one person going after another that really doesn't accomplish anything for us. And I think especially the original creator of Spy versus Spy was sensitive to these things. He had watched the political turmoil in his own country, the manipulations of the United States sometimes around Cuban doctrines and things. And I think there was this sense of realizing, what does this all do in the end? All these political games that we play. And maybe we just need to learn some other way to be than constantly in this kind of back and forth struggle with one another. So it was another great find in the grocery aisle. Spy versus Spy, the big blast. And it was fun to go back. And they even had statistics about Spy versus Spy in here. So they had they're in the magazine itself. They're giving you the statistics. In the magazine, there are 11 top secret satchels that appear and disappear. 9% of the strips showed a victorious spy making the V sign. 2 double cannons were used for fatalities. So you get all these little fun facts about the comic strips that were in this particular issue as well. So spy versus spy, and here's our female spy on the back. So spy versus spy, the big blast. I would recommend it. It was a fun read, especially if you love spy versus spy.
I have to ask, where do you go for your groceries?
I found both of these at Metro Market in Glendale.
Okay. I have to talk to the management at the local grocery store and see what they can do about that.
Yeah, get some good stuff.
Yeah, write some letters. Write some letters. I had, there was some Archie. I bet you can find some Archie. I had to step off camera to grab the nearest Mad magazine, which I have when Weird Al was a guest editor, and they do have some spy versus spy there. So I'm leaving that out to read right after the club, so I can revisit that. So, all right. So in between my reviews, we've definitely had some, heavy discussions and heavy, topics and stuff like that. So I think I might be able to bring some of that heaviness with my next title, because I think there's some lessons and stuff. So this is Where Does the Rainbow End? Issue number 1. Gilda has been abandoned by her parents, but fortunately she has been discovered in the robot dump and has been raised by the robots who discovered her. She was lucky to be found in the Rainbow Sector by robots that cared for her. However, she has also been shielded from the outside world, other humans, and from dangerous section. And other humans, and from a dangerous section of the robot world called the Dark Cage, where the most hostile of robots live. Word has spread about her ability to fix robots, though, and one vicious robot from Dark Cage wants her to repair all of the violent robots that live there, and nothing will stop him. This is done by Francesca Perillo, Stefano Caroselli, Lorenzo Scaramella, and Buddy Bedoin. I like the title. I like the cover artwork. This was a previews purchase, so I didn't know much going into it. And I was happy to see that the cover art also reflected what the interior art was. So I was going to get a very similar style. Right off the bat, you get an overview map of this kind of division between a human world and a robot world. This is in New York City, but it is just in you see some really great imagery here of this robot walking home from work. There's the Statue of Liberty. As you go through like the robot dump and stuff, you just see just a lot of dirt and grime and just really gorgeous artwork to kind of reflect the mood and the tone of what's going on. As this robot, he's got his lunch pail. He's just walking home from work, and what he does as the setup for the story is that he notices a little basket on the ground in front of him and finds out that there is a little baby girl in that basket. And now this robot is taking it upon himself to care for this young girl, this baby that has been abandoned. There's nobody else in sight. And he himself, there is a female robot at home that he knows that she can help with whatever they need to do with this. So here is, she's a little upset that he's taken so long to get home from work, and she had these tasks to be done. And then immediately when she finds out what he found, you see her monitor goes from an angry face over to a heart as she has this connection with this human child. The years go on as we see them, this group of robots are caring for this human. They realize that, all right, this human's been abandoned. We're just going to take it upon ourselves to raise this child. And when the child is old enough, we're going to let them decide, where they want to live. Do they want to be with the humans, or do they want to be with the robots? And a decision to kind of let them make when they're able. So this is all just in the first issue. Is the child is grown. We're maybe looking at like a 7 to 10 year old. Her name is Gilda, and as the synopsis says, she is very good at repairing the robots. So she's found a good role in the family as she's helping repair them throughout the years. And once other robots have found out that this human is around and seeing the skills, that's when these evil robots have decided that they are going to basically capture the human girl and make her work for the bad robots. Not J.J. Abrams' bad robot, that's a different thing. The robots that are evil, I should say, within this fictional story. So that is the first issue setup, and it has a really great cliffhanger to want you to get back to the next one. So I have the second issue in my pile yet, so I let a couple of these build up. And what's really cool about this series is, once again, trying to take a lot of the philosophical elements that you guys have brought to your reviews and trying to figure out the meaning of the story, and talking about humanity and what humanity and how they treat these robots, and how robots kind of look at humanity, the fact that they're taking this, they're retrieving this girl, they're saving this young girl, but they don't really do much to actively try to find where the parents were. They just figured somebody just left this baby out in the wild, so we're they've already made a mistake. That's their interpretation of it, is that how could somebody do this, so we're gonna take care of her. And there's an interesting dynamic in here where the young girl is kind of overhearing about her history before, she doesn't know anything other than these robots are her parents. And it's a really cool relationship of seeing, so I'm sure there's a lot of lessons here when it comes to, adoption and, chosen family and things like that. And yeah, that's as much as I can bring to try to bring, you guys are always bringing good thought pieces to the comics and the stories I read. So I don't really have much to say about the Muppet Babies and Charley and Humphrey, and just good fun hijinks and stuff. But yeah, this one, it was a real emotional touch to this. Now, when reading the synopsis, there was something I clipped out of it because it referred to a series that I reviewed sometime last year called Love Me, a Romance Story. This was a comic that I brought to the table. So when I was reading this, about halfway through the book, I'm just like, did I read this before? I definitely didn't, but there was a very familiar art style and robots and this and that. And when I read that in the synopsis, I was like, oh, these people have done, similar type stories, but now I found out that this Where the Rainbow Ends is now a prequel to this book that I randomly picked up. So I pre-ordered both of them, but they weren't connected and being like, oh, we get more of this. I just was drawn to what I seen. And now I found out that, the same people that I just listed are all included in this, in both of these series that I've didn't even know were connected. So now I'm extra excited to continue on with Where Does the Rainbow End? And what was really funny is that I had this issue sitting next to me this whole time because I've been meaning to get around to seeing if I should tackle a trade or pick up the next individual issues. So now I've read the first issue of the main series and the first issue of the prequel series, and I have to dive into both of them at the same time.
There you go.
But yeah,
did it give you an indication of what the relationship is between the robots and humans? Are they on good terms? Are they separated out? Or
there's a lot of text in the beginning here, so let me just see if I can. I gotta shine literally some light on it here too. There was a time long ago when humans and robots inhabited the world in harmony. Humans lived in the big cities, while robots who worked in their service were only allowed to live on the outskirts. In New York City, robot communities settled in the it's a made-up word, Casas Brothers' large clear world landfill. Um, Two very different groups lived there: the robots, the good and the bad robots. And let's see here. The hostile robots that were once used for military purposes, who lived in the dark cage. So they once lived in harmony, and now you see that they're kind of separated. And it seems, because you see some humans in the background when he's walking home from work and stuff, so you kind of get the impression that, yeah, he's got some jobs that maybe he's working for humans, but he goes back to like the robot side and everything. So it is a very the young girl, Gilda, doesn't even know that there are other people like her. That's a very important part of this first issue, is that she doesn't even see herself as different, because she doesn't know anything more than this is who she is and this is who they are. They're robots. So she's been sheltered from knowing that there are other humans that exist. She probably doesn't even know the term human. So
I wondered if that was the motivation then for the robots just to keep her then too, was we can't take this baby to the humans because they'll think we took it and we're going to be in trouble. So the only thing we can do is hang on to this child.
And maybe that'll be explored. That's definitely a good idea, a good assumption of what could happen. But yeah, it's that was the other thing. Yeah, the fact that she doesn't even know that other people look like her. So
neat.
But yeah, like I said, the art style was really, really what drew me, with it just being kind of, there's just a lot to look at. There's a lot of detail and stuff. While it could be kind of scruffy and roughed up and dirty and stuff like that, at the same time, it's very detailed, and you see like every little mechanic and bell and whistle on the robots and stuff. So you see every little battle scar and stuff like that. So there's a lot of detail going into this artwork. So, and
Cool.
even here's another good look at the Statue of Liberty and the city and stuff. Just the color palettes and stuff are really cool. So yeah, that is Where Does the Rainbow End, a prequel to Love Me, a romance story that I reviewed last year.
Okay. Cool.
Now I gotta seek out the rest. All right, so we have one more review left here, and if people are new to the show, definitely go back to the last couple episodes since Dr. Kurtstad's returned, because he's been doing a little experiment of kind of finding these characters that have been kind of lost in time and history, and we're going to learn a little more in this next review.
Right. So I was looking around for another one of those characters that really didn't get a lot of play throughout the time they've been around. And I found one where they said, well, before Deadpool, this was kind of the sort of Deadpoolish character. And so I went out looking up this character, the awesome Slapstick. Anybody heard of this guy before?
I've read him where he showed up in a couple issues, and I'm pretty sure he showed up with Deadpool or Gwenpool.
Yep.
So
he does eventually end up in the Deadpool and the Mercs for Money series.
Okay.
That's where he eventually comes in at one point. This is number one. I had to search around for the original appearance of Slapstick was in his own series, a 4-issue series. It starts out giving us kind of his origin story. Slapstick is a young man named Stevie Harmon, who's a practical joker at school. He seems to give his mom a lot of trouble. They at one point say from when he was born, he did things really odd. When he was in school, he did a report on robot science fiction and dressed up in this weird costume. And so all along, he's been this weird kind of kid who doesn't have very many friends, and really the girl he likes is going out with someone else. And so at one point, he finds out that there's going to be this big circus, mainly of clowns, that is in town. And this girl and her boyfriend are going to go. And so he's going to go and prank them. So to do this, he dresses up like a clown. Because then he says, well, I can get away with, doing stuff. People won't know who I am. He shows up there and finds out that clowns in the circus are kidnapping people there and taking them to another dimension. And he sees the portal and he decides that he's got to try to stop them. So he leaps through the portal. And the problem is the portal is on its way to being closed when he jumps through. And it changes his entire DNA structure. And he becomes basically a living cartoon.
Yes.
He can stretch, he can, things don't hurt him. I should point out one of the great things in this, and I'm not going to do a lot of it, is there's a lot of references to other comics kind of as jokes within it. So the very first panel is, once upon a time in the depths of space, there existed a shining planet known as Krypton. A world where the inhabitants had raised themselves to the pinnacle of mental and physical perfection. And then they show this big explosion and it says, well, so much for them. And then the story goes on. And as he's getting ready to be slapstick as he jumps through, we have all these people who suddenly have these premonitions. Doctor Strange, something strange is happening in the cosmos. Spider-Man's spider sense goes off. The Watcher knows something crazy is happening in the universe. Howard the Duck leans over and throws up after having a night of drinking. The Silver Surfer, yep, there's the Silver Surfer. He made it into the comic. Gets this impression, and then we have Slapstick shows up. He doesn't know what's going on, but as he comes through the portal, he's kind of taken under the wing of a scientist in this Dimension X who looks remarkably like Groucho Marx. And he goes, well, I can't really undo this to you, but I can give you these gloves. And he gives him a big set of white gloves that he puts on. One has a button in it that allows him to change back into his normal human personality. And the other button allows him to pull things from a secret pocket that he has within himself. And he pulls out mostly a huge mallet that he pounds people with. And so he goes on to defeat these people, these beings who are trying to take over our cosmos, closes the portal so they can no longer grab our people and try to brainwash them, because everyone in Dimension X has been brainwashed by the leader to be clowns who just do the bidding of the leader, and trying to do the same with Earthlings. He gets them all out, all the people who are there. And then he goes and finally tells his friend that he's kind of, had this strange thing. And his friend tells him, he tells him, well, now you can fight supervillains and save the world. And he says, no, I've got a better idea. I'll just prank villains. And so they're trying to think of a name. And so his friend says Captain Clown, and he says dumb. The Joker, taken. The Jester, dumb and taken. And then he goes, Slapstick. That's it. And so then we have this new character who now will take on the forces of evil, I guess. And the last panel in the first book is that someone's coming to town. Someone who looks remarkably like the Punisher, filled with weapons, looking for mutants to take them down. And so then he'll go into, in the second issue, he'll take this person on. He keeps telling him, I'm not a mutant. And one of the interesting things about this comic is there are just steals from every comic or every cartoon you've ever seen, shows that have been on. He's like hunting down one character, and it's like, shh, be very quiet. I'm hunting. Or from Dirty Harry. I'm trying to remember the Dirty Harry quote he had. It was, "Do you feel lucky, punk?" So all through, you get these references to all kinds of cartoons, television shows. It's actually a pretty humorous sort of piece in the initial presentation of Slapstick. And I suppose one of the things that led people to say that Slapstick was kind of the precursor to Deadpool is that occasionally Slapstick will break the fourth wall. He's like, I guess, maybe one of the first ones who does. So the very last page of the last issue of the original four, he breaks out, "Help! I need my own series. Write to Tom DeFalco. Write to Mark Grunwald. Write to your congressman. Help me get my own book, and I promise, lots of fight scenes, cosmic spectacle, exploding galaxies, mutants, anything you want. Just save me." And and so the fourth issue of his comic ends, and he appears in a couple issues of Spider-Man after that, but for a while he sort of disappears until 2019 shows up in or not 2019, I think it's 1999. He shows up in New Warriors for a few issues. He's in the New Warriors, which leads him into, he has a longer appearance than in the Initiative around the Civil War comics. If you remember that, they were grabbing superheroes who were forced to register, and if you weren't trained, then you had to go into these camps and be trained for superhero work in hopes of maybe becoming an Avenger. So they snatch up all the New Warriors, they put them in the camp. They're being taught by Gauntlet, is like their drill sergeant, who just is really cruel to them and makes them work hard. They finally get an assignment to do some minor thing on the outskirts while other people are fighting the Hulk and a bunch of villains who have joined up with him against the against Stark and the forces that they've put together. And they decide they have to go help. They go there and get beat up by these villains and the Hulk. In fact, at one point, Slapstick gets turned into a pile of goo that has to be brought back from that. I think somebody electrocutes him and turns back into himself, because electricity also powers him up at times. And they get sent back to the Initiative, and now their lives made even more miserable by Gauntlet, who's driving them real hard. And this is where suddenly the whole run of who Slapstick is takes a weird turn. Okay. Because he gets really angry about all this, and he beats Gauntlet almost to death. This character who so far has been kind of comical and goofy and doing things suddenly becomes sort of dark. Okay. He keeps trying to tell his friends what he's done, but he can't bring himself to reveal that he's the one who, because they're all upset about who beat up Gauntlet, even though he's been cruel and everything. They can't imagine anybody. They think one of the other New Warriors who's always angry is the one who did it. And he keeps it to himself, but doesn't say anything. And that kind of runs the course of the Initiative. He shows up once in Civil War 2, just for a couple panels, and vanishes again for a while. And then he shows up in Deadpool and Mercs for Money in 2017. And he's, along with all the other Mercs, frustrated with Deadpool's leadership. And you can see suddenly that with Deadpool's now the one who's doing all the jokes. So he gets kind of thrust into this role more almost as a straight person within the comic, no longer with that sense of kind of goofiness that went on with his character. And then he ends up with his own series again in 2017 for 6 issues. And in that, again, he's much darker than the initial Slapstick that came into being. Now he's, people shoot bullets at him and he spits the bullets back and kills all the people who are, this is no more pranking people. This is the deadly Slapstick, who still making jokes, still using cartoon sort of quotes. Snaggletooth gets quoted a lot with heavens to Murgatroyd. Let's go. So this one runs him back into dimension, which he finds out X is a mispronunciation. It's dimension Ich.
Oh yeah.
So we have the reference back to the brand
Yeah.
stuff in Marvel. At this point, he's also, when he's in the initiative, he loses his ability to change back into himself. So now he's just a cartoon all the time, which bothers him a lot because this is all not for children as you get later in Slapstick. He's lost his male abilities as a cartoon, and he's frustrated with that. He's frustrated with his life. He's hoping maybe one of the supervillains, who I won't lay out for everybody, will help him get back to who he was. So he hides him away in his house and hopes he can get him back. Hopes maybe going back to Dimension X will get him back to who he is, but it really doesn't. And the 6-issue series kind of leaves things hanging. There's nothing, there's not much of a change in who he is or what's happening. So I thought there was a lot of potential when it first came out. It was funny. I think part of what they ran into a problem with is with a character like that, before you have Deadpool and setting up a different dynamic, how do you put them in with Spider-Man? Or how do you put them in with the Fantastic Four? Or how do you put them in with anyone? In fact, in the initial series, one of the villains that shows up is this poor man, and you don't know whether he's been subjected to nuclear radiation or whatever, but he's running around asking people for $1 for a cup of coffee, and when they don't, he causes a nuclear explosion that kills people all around him, and then he's asking for $100 for a cup of coffee, then $1 million for a cup of coffee, and when no one will give it to him, he keeps blowing up. So Slapstick realizes, he first of all tries to go and stop him and can't. Then he goes, I have an idea. He gets a cup of coffee. All these other superheroes by now have shown up and tried to stop him, and they can't. They're all arguing about, how do we do this? How do we catch him without causing an explosion? Slapstick runs off and gets a cup of coffee and puts it in his secret pocket. And then when he gets to the guy, he takes it out and goes, here's a cup of coffee. While the guy is drinking, going, wow, this is really good. Slapstick comes up behind him and hits him with his mallet and knocks him out. And all the other superheroes go, well, that was unhonorable. What are you doing? That was a terrible way to treat this person. And Slapstick's like, well, what do you want? I stopped him. So it was an interesting character. The person who created this character is look at the opening credits here and see if I can find it. It is let's see.
Is it Lem Kaminsky?
Yeah, Lem Kaminsky.
And artist James W. Fry III.
Right. And the artistry is interesting in it. It's kind of colorful, interesting sort of artistry with lots of wham, bam sorts of sound effects within the comics. You have interesting people show up with him. Deadpool, or not Deadpool, but in the original comic, Ghost Rider shows up, Speedball, who he makes fun of the whole time, and as I said, a bunch of other superheroes. So I enjoyed the initial 4, but I could see the problem they had. How do we slide this character into a more serious... I mean, for the most part, superheroes are more serious within the Marvel universe. And what do you do with this character who's kind of goofy and offbeat? And they finally managed to get it right, I guess, when they got to Deadpool. But by then, Slapstick is kind of on the back burner. Now we have a better version of what we originally tried to do with Slapstick. But I thought originally the concept was interesting, but as you made him darker, I'm not sure it really works at that point in time. Once you start to take away that kind of goofy, silly sort of approach to things, I think it makes it harder to make this character work. And so we haven't really seen him since that 6-issue 2017 run of Slapstick. He's kind of disappeared from the face of the earth. So I would certainly recommend read the first 4.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm wondering. That's what I'm wondering too. Like, if the people who did the more modern version, if they're just like, "Hey, we haven't heard from Slapstick in a while. Let's reinvent them, or let's bring them into the modern world." And obviously, a lot of things always go darker and stuff like that. So that's why I wonder too that, like, all right, we're not using him for a reason. So maybe let's try to
update the poor guy. But
now it's
I'm
been
not sure
almost
the update works, especially because you have Deadpool now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. How do you utilize a character like Slapstick when you have Deadpool? And in fact, you see that when he appears in Deadpool Mercs for Money. What do you do? Deadpool's doing all the jokes.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out when we see Slapstick in Avengers Doomsday this coming. No.
Yeah, maybe. Could add a certain lightness to that.
When you were describing him, I kept getting images of The Mask.
They have compared him to that as well. You know, this kind of sense of, especially when he could switch back and forth between who he was.
Yeah.
But he has the ability, like, he gets hit with explosions and it doesn't do anything to him. Bullets just kind of go through him. He can stretch all over the place. He's always pulling weird stuff out of his. It starts out, he's got a button he pushes and the thing suddenly appears in his hand and he uses it. In the last thing, he reaches into his pants and pulls stuff out and throws it at people. So, you know, they kind of switch that. I think it was more classy to have the glove than. But that's just me. It's probably not a comic for really young kids, but teenagers, there's a lot of teenage humor, especially in the first 4 again. I think you lose that when you get into later appearances of Slapstick. But somebody might be interested. Here's another one who we tried.
Yeah. Tried again.
We don't know what happened. Yeah, maybe we'll try again someday.
And I've been meaning to ask this when you bring up these kind of character studies, is that what leads you to finding the characters that you've been choosing? Like, what led you to Slapstick? Are you looking at a Google list, or are you?
Yeah, the process usually begins with me typing in something like short-lived characters in comics or in the Marvel universe or in the DC universe. I'll get a list of them and I'll look through it and go, that might be an interesting one to take a look at. And especially this one, when somebody described it in one of those lists as, well, this was Deadpool before we had Deadpool. I said, well, let's take a look at what that's about. And yeah, and the idea that he broke the fourth wall before we had Deadpool, that everybody might think that was the first time comics broke out into this, but it's not. And there's probably people who use that method or that gimmick in other comics before Slapstick too.
She-Hulk from John Byrne in the 80s was doing the fourth wall breaking, and so there was a lot of people that were saying, like, when She-Hulk was doing it in, like, the television show, the live action show and stuff, and they're like, oh, they're just stealing Deadpool stuff, being like, no, Deadpool is stealing her stuff, and and possibly Slapstick stuff too.
Yeah. So, but again, it was fun to read it, especially the first kind of things to see. They had a lot of, like, little nods to different shows and cartoons and stuff within it that I thought, well, that's kind of fun too. That's kind of a fun approach to things. So
yeah, good. All right, so yeah, that is going to do it then for our weekly reviews. The quick plugs: go to crimsoncowl.com for all the info and original webcomics, as well as ways to reach out to purchase some of the physical comics from Crimson Cowl Media. You can always email crimsoncowlcomics@gmail.com. And then the audio podcast, Crimson Cowl Comic Club, over on iTunes. I always recommend to subscribe, rate, and review, share with a friend. If you want the full experience with the video version that do all of that same stuff, but over on YouTube, Crimson Cowl Comic Club over on YouTube. I have my own comic books, Race Christopher. If you want to reach out to me, latchkeykid@gmail.com, LAATSCH. And I have Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts for my artwork as well. That is under Anthony Laatsch. And then I also host Cartoonist by Night, a drawing show. We have over 70 episodes. We have a couple episodes in the bank. By the time this releases, both of them might be out, but check it out. We have a lot of fun stuff in there where we invite creator and artist guests onto the show, and we have them talk about what they love to talk about. We draw that topic and learn all about them. So yeah, the most recent episode in the feed is with the Chalk Girl. We discussed the fantasy genre, and then we had another episode where we welcome back our friends Lavi and Natsuki for a random catch-up episode. And yeah, so Cartoonist by Night over on YouTube. And we'll continue to advertise our friend Kirby's channel under the Cowl of MS. Go there for hours upon hours of videos and stories and unpackings and everything that you can imagine over at Under the Cowl of MS. And that is going to do it then for our show. This whole time, I have made my dreams come true.
Now I've been searching those grocery store checkout lines, looking for which ones are classy enough to carry some interesting comic stuff.
I don't want to be your enemy.
To be continued.
Everybody take care, and we will talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.